Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about state and the concept of state and what I mean by that. And I do not mean California or New York or nations either. I'm talking about programming state. So in programming, state is a concept that basically means the way something currently is, its current situation, okay? So right now, for example, our content view here has state, right? And that is, these things. However, that state does not change. It's immutable, okay? Immutable state is what you use structs for, primarily. However, you might find on occasion that you want something called mutable state, where you can change this stuff. For example, if these cat facts were randomly sourced from an API, and we wanted to just get 3 random cat facts every time we came onto this screen, right? If that's the case, we can't really have these cat facts just shoved in here now, can we? That doesn't work, right? So in order to handle that, let's go ahead and, do a couple of things to just sort of learn how to kind of do some sort of interesting stuff. So, and let me do this. Okay. So first of all, let's make a button that adds a new random cat fact to our group here, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to change this to facts, all right? And we're going to change this from fact to fact, from greeting to facts, and from greeting to fact, and fact to fact, right? Okay, cool. Fact. Love that. So these are our current facts, okay? So now let's go ahead and make that empty. And because it's empty, we have to tell it that it's an array of strings, because otherwise it can't infer that, right? And now let's call this API facts. So let's assume that we're getting these asynchronously from some API somewhere, right? And that like if the next time we just go through it, right, we're gonna the next one we hit is just gonna be the next fact in the list, right? So in order to do that, we also need to maintain a count of where we're at, right? So we're on the first index of the array, now we're on the second and the third and so on and so forth. So we'll call this like API index, right? This is just a little hack so that we're not having to hit an actual API in this example, because that would suck. And I'm recording, right? Yeah, okay. And right now it's yelling about this. Why is it yelling about this? Right. Right, because this is an array of cat facts. Sorry. Not strings. That's my bad. Cat facts are better than strings. They're strings with identifiers. Okay, cool. So we have these API facts. We have this API index. So let's go ahead and create a button that when you press on it, it'll take whatever is in this API facts list and it will add it to facts. And in fact, we actually don't even need this index if we can just modify this, right? So, okay, we need to modify API facts. Let's go ahead and make it a var. Cool. Okay, now we can change it. Right, dope. Okay, cool. And same thing with this. This needs to be a var so that we can change it. All right, awesome, right? And in fact, just so that we're not having to change 2 different things, we're going to go ahead and just make this a global variable. Don't make global variables, guys. This is just for demonstration. We're pretending that an API exists. Don't make global variables. Also, don't make global variables, okay? Don't do it. They're bad. Bad. Global variables, don't do it. But we're pretending right now for teaching, so it's okay. I'm giving myself a pass. And I answer to myself here, so that's okay. Who watches the watchers? All right. Now, our list of facts before, it was kind of nice, right? It looked okay, but it kind of looked terrible, right? And here we can actually just, if we take a look at the styling of it again real quick, let's just go ahead and fix this just so that, we know what we're dealing with here, there, right? Right. So this kind of looks bad. The spacing is weird because it's trying to be centered for all of them, right? Which, you could fix by doing like, the alignment on the V-stack right here, which would affect all of them, right? Which is kind of not great, but like, all this stuff. Apple has a for each loop like view that you might recognize the look of when you see it, and that is list. And now you're looking at this list and you're like, huh, well, this looks interestingly familiar. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Okay. And if I go to this, can I? Yeah, I can scroll. Okay. Huh, well, would you look at that? You know what this looks like to me, guys? This looks suspiciously like a table view, doesn't it? Right? And it is. It is a table view, okay? So when you want a table view in SwiftUI, you use something called a list, okay? And then you'll recall table view you could change what the table view looked like, right? There was like the ability, you could make it like plain or grouped or whatever, right? When you go to modifiers, one of the most helpful things to first search for when you're looking at a new type of view that you're not familiar with is style. Style, there are a bunch of different types of style modifiers, and it will usually pick the one that's most relevant for your view. In this case, the list style. Oh, cool. Okay, list style. And then here you hit dot and you can see, oh, we've got grouped, inset grouped, plain, sidebar, etc. Oh, wow, that's really neat, right? So here if we pick plain, aha, look at that. Now it looks a lot like the ones that we're used to seeing where it's, just the white, and then it's got the dividers that are really hard to make out on my screen, and I don't know about yours, but it's just because they're so zoomed out, right? But that's okay because we can go to this and then just zoom in a bunch, and then you can see them a little bit better. It's still really tough. Contrast is difficult when you're dealing with something like this. But point is, it's better formatted. It looks kind of nicer, okay? So cool, great. We've made a list now. That's nice. It uses the same kind of style as for each does, where you pass it a collection and then you need to specify an identifier unless the types inside the collection are identifiable. That is to say, they have adopted and conformed to the identifiable protocol, right? And then you get a parameter, which is the particular one that you're handling, and then you can use that, that one that you're getting to modify and create a view or set of views, right? Cool. Okay. So here we've got our cat fact. So let's go ahead and move these out to our, no good, don't do this global variable. Pretend that we're getting them from the API one at a time. All right. And now we're going to create a button. And this button is going to basically pop something off of this and push it onto that. Okay. So we're going to pop it off our API and push it onto facts. Okay. So we're going to go to button. And there's a bunch of different ones here that you can do, okay? And the one that we're most interested in kind of right now, right, is action label, or if you want, title key action, okay? So title key action, basically, you can pass it a string, right, like new fact, okay? And then if you go, if you hit tab and it highlights this, and then you hit enter, it'll shortcut it down into that like shortcut syntax we've talked about, right? Where if a closure is the last parameter, it creates this, right? And then we can do a builder in here, right? Or not a builder, sorry. This is just real code. So in here we can do all that stuff. We can do a for loop. We can do all the things that we talked about not being able to do inside of a result builder, because now the context of this closure is real code. It's not a result builder, okay? That's not what's getting returned. So here now we can do things and make changes, right? So okay, cool. So we've got facts. So we want to append to. Well, first let's get something off of API fact. So let's say let new fact equals API facts dot pop last. Okay, pop last is it's something they've got on array, so I'm just going to use it. Okay, so we're going to pop the last one off of that. Cool. And now we can go and we'll say, okay, cool. Facts dot append, right? That's how you add something to an array. New fact. All right, cool. Yeah, this will work. Right. We can't mutate because this view is a struct, right? Well, does that mean that our views can't hold any state? They can't have any data or information? That makes them very, very hard to use, right? If the information that they hold has to be completely static and can't be changed, right? Well, in order to handle this, Apple has created a attribute that you can apply to properties and structs that allows them to be mutable in a way that is thread safe and that doesn't mess with, you don't have race conditions, you don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. And basically what it does is it kind of turns the object sort of into a reference type, kind of, but not really, and puts observers on it. It basically wraps a bunch of stuff around your data, and that's called a binding. Okay, or sorry, not a binding. Sorry, it's called state. Okay, so let's go ahead and go. We'll use this. So if you set this state, okay, variable or attribute on your property, right? Then this now becomes something that can be modified. All right, it's now something that can be changed specifically for your view, right? Cool. We still have an error here, right? And that's because pop last returns an optional, okay? If you click into it, you can see that, right? Or, instead of click in with command, you could option click to get a pop-up, right, information. But we can see self.element ? So this is optional, which means that new fact could be nil, right? And append doesn't take nil because our array of cat facts is not optional, right? These aren't optional cat facts, okay? So we can just do, guard let else return, right? You could also, if you'd prefer, use if let and just put this append inside of there. However, whenever you can use guard let, try to. It's preferred. The less indentations, the less deep we nest inside of brackets, the better for readability purposes, okay? So we can just do this like that and then this. Cool. Okay. So now that we've done this, this code in here will execute whenever this button is pressed. Okay? So we'll click new fact and we get a new fact. Oh, well, would you look at that? What about another? Oh, here's another fact. Oh, they like their bellies rubbed. Well, only some of them. Don't do it to all of them. Some of them don't like it. But they look like they'll like it, but they won't like it. They'll rip your hand up. Okay? There's another one, right? It's scrollable, okay? That's the other thing that's nice about list over the for each is that it's scrollable by default, right? You can scroll through it, you can, read it, right? And if you click new fact more, because we have this guard in here, nothing bad happens when there's nothing new. Now, I just made a change to the code and hit Command S, and immediately all my facts disappeared. That's because it recompiled, rebuilt, and represented everything to me that quickly, right? The preview is just that fast with SwiftUI, okay? Unless you make your view too complicated, in which case it gets very slow, all right? And there are ways to mitigate that, and we'll look at those shortly. But, cool, so we've got our state here. All right, dope. What if I wanted my button to look different than this, right? This is a pretty kind of, I don't know about this button, right? It looks like a hyperlink to me, right? Apple is preferring this kind of button for some reason over like the one with like the big blue circle. I don't know. But most people, my homies, okay, tend to prefer, big round circle buttons, okay? So me and my homies like bordered prominent buttons, all right? That looks much nicer to me. But, that's a personal preference, okay? And again, button style, right? Okay, cool. We're being pretty consistent here. Style changes how it looks, right? There's a bunch of options here. There's bordered, okay, which is just kind of a border like this, right? There's bordered prominent, as we showed before. There's borderless, right, which is kind of what it is by default. And there's plain, which also is sort of like borderless, but it's not got that highlight color to it, so there's no way to tell that it's a button, all right? It almost looks like a label, okay? But yeah, so bordered prominent, cool. All right, so here we're writing code. This is great. We love this, okay? But what if we want, you know, it's kind of bad that like there's not a fact on the screen to start with, right? There should be at least one fact here, right? So one thing that we can do is, let's say we want this code to run, you know, whenever like, you know, something like this is happening, right? Let's go ahead and let's pull it out into a function because we're going to be calling it again, okay? So we'll say private func get new fact, right? And we'll do this, okay? Cool. So now we can call get new fact here, and it should work the same way. Cool. Okay, great. Now that we've done that, how do we get it so that when we first see these views, we get a new fact? The first fact of the day, if you will, right? There is a modifier for that, of course, right? Apple's really big on that kind of, you know, oh, there's an app for that, right? Remember that was their whole ad campaign, right? There's an app for that. Well, there's a modifier for that, okay? So, yeah. The modifier for it, in this case, is called onAppear, okay? So onAppear is a modifier that will run code inside of it, okay? That is not result builder. It doesn't have to turn into a view. It's not expecting a return type, okay? This is just code for you to run and modify your view's state, right? And do things in, okay? So onAppear, we can do get new fact, like so, right? Yay, hey, okay, cool. So now there's always a fact here, right? And if we change this, right? Oh, because it's not randomized, never mind. So for a second I was like, oh yeah, we randomized it, so it'll be a new one every time. That's not true. It's not random. So it should be, that would be great, but it's not. Okay, so onAppear lets you do that. Now, I hear what you're saying. Professor Dan, we learned all about, we're pretending this is an API call. Okay, we learned all about how API calls have to be done on the background. They block the main thread. They don't draw. It's really bad. You taught us all this stuff about async await and all that, you know. But now you're doing this all synchronously, right? Like, okay, fair. Okay, so let's pretend for a hot second, okay, that this function is actually asynchronous, right? It's actually an async function, okay, and it's supposed to happen in the background thread because it's fetching from an API, right? You can mark it async in order to get that effect on the compiler. So now it's going to yell at us. It's going to tell us really mean things and say we can't do what we wanted to do, right? Fair. So when we want to run something asynchronously, when something appears, when a view appears, like onAppear, right? There is a modifier for that, okay? And it's called task, all right? So the task modifier gives you the same exact stuff as onAppear. However, the block is within an asynchronous context, okay? So now we have to use await, right? Async await, there it is, we did it, okay? Button is a little bit trickier, okay? Because button doesn't have it has a task modifier, but that will run when it appears, right? So, you know, okay, what do we, you know, how do we handle that, right? There's sort of two ways, and you might have noticed it as I was looking at the task API there, right? But the first, right, is, as we know, we can move from the synchronous context to an asynchronous context using a task block, like so, right? This is kind of grody, It's a little weird, a little gross, right? It's not the best, okay? Because this task is unstructured, okay? It's not ideal, but if you do this, you'll want to hold on to the task so that you can cancel it if the user ever leaves this screen or something, because you don't want it to keep running when this screen no longer exists, which it will do if you don't hold on to it and turn it off, right? Which is why unstructured tasks are generally something you don't want to use, right? The other thing you can do, boop, 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 right, is there is this, here, turn that off. There is a type of task that if you're reading the descriptions down here, which it might be hard to do, right? So adds an asynchronous task to perform before this view appears. Okay, well, that's, we want it to happen when the person clicks it, right? Adds a task to perform before this view appears or when a specified value changes. Okay, right? Adds a task to perform before this view appears or when a specified value changes, right? Same thing, right? It's just a variant of is the priority being used or not, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so what does this mean? So this equatable value, right, it will basically watch this. And if that value changes at any point in time, then this code will run, right? So now we can go in here and we can call await get new fact, right? And now we have this equatable. Okay, so let's see. So we need a value and we need it to change, right? Okay, well, one value that we could have change is a, I don't know, let's call it cat fact toggle, right? It's a Boolean. It'll just flip back and forth, true to false, true to false, true to false, right? And whenever it changes, we get a new fact, okay? So we'll make this false to start with. And then here in button, we'll go ahead and go to cat fact toggle, and we'll call .toggle, which is a function that exists on Boolean, the Boolean type. And it just flips it from whatever it is to the other one, okay? And then it's like, oh, right, we can't use right. We can't mutate it. We can't change it unless it's state. So we make it state. Boom, done, right? Now it's like, oh, yeah, you can't do that, right? This does not conform to view. So right now it's trying to get a view from this for some reason. Oh, right, because we haven't finished, right? So it's getting confused because there's not compilable code later. So here now we can watch cat fact toggle. So anytime cat fact toggle changes, await get new fact will change. Now what this means, of course, you'll see there is now two cat facts here for some reason, right? And cat fact toggle changes when we first create it. It goes from not created to existing in false, okay? And so this will fire the very first time, which also means that we don't need this task, right? Sorry, that's not true. That's not why it happens the first time. The reason it happens the first time is because if you read the description, sorry, I misspoke, adds a task to perform before this view appears or when a specified value changes, which means both of those things. So this task will run before the view appears and when the specified value changes, okay? Both things will cause this to run, right? Cool. Okay, so now we get a new fact. Awesome, it's asynchronous. It's not actually, but we can pretend it is, okay? Because we use the async keyword, which means that we actually could do asynchronous stuff in here safely, right? Awesome. Okay, cool. So our view is getting kind of big. It's getting kind of big. Little bit of a chunky kind of view, right? And you know what? Let's go ahead and let's change our cat picture. We've been looking at the same one. Let's get a chonker, okay? Like this one. This guy's cute. Copy image. And we're going to go here. We're going to go to our assets, paste it in. We're going to call it chonker. I'm going to rename this chonker. There he is. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted. Honestly, I'd rather it like kind of be a little more zoomed in. But I don't remember. What is it? Is there a zoom? No. There's a way to do it. I'll be danged if I can remember how. Resizable doesn't, oh wait, yeah, I might take a resizing mode. No, that's the tile. Insets. Yeah, it's like one of these, right? Okay, I don't remember how off the top of my head. It's okay, we don't need to zoom in on the cat, it's fine. He's adorable anyway, or she. I can't really tell. So, I distracted myself with the chonker, I'm sorry. So our view's getting kind of chonky. It's a little big, okay? Let's go ahead and break it up. Let's make this a bunch of different views that are getting used within one other view, okay? So, how do we do that? All right, well, to start with, let's go ahead, we'll go over here, we'll hit Command-N, and we'll create a new SwiftUI view. We will call this one cat facts list, all right? This is gonna hold our list of cat facts primarily, all right? So here we're gonna, okay, cool, so it's a hello world, that's great. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna get our list of facts and our button, along with all the accoutrements that go with that. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get the button and the list. There we go. And we're gonna move them to cat facts list, right? And, oh, right, and it can't find facts. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and let's create a facts, right? Oh, and it needs to be a var and state, right? So state var facts, right? Cat fact, so on and so forth, okay? And then boop, 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 right? And then, oh, cat fact toggle, right. And so we can look here and we can say, okay, we're not gonna use the cat fact toggle anywhere else, right? So we can just take that, right? And put it in here, okay? Great, cool. And then, oh, right, get new cat fact, right? That's not here, right? So we need to move that over, okay? So we move that over here, boop, 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 outside of body, like so, okay? Great. All right, so this should now compile, but we're not gonna get our list, right? And that's fine, okay? So now we're going to add above the divider our new cat facts list, like so. Huzzah! It's here, it works, does the same thing, right? Cool. Okay, now what if we were actually getting our new facts on a higher level view? What if we weren't getting them here, right? And you'll notice this looks very different, by the way, right? Because it's expanding as much as it can in some ways, and because, you know, and then also shrinking in others. But let's say that, you know, this button, for example, let's say that the button and the get new fact and all that functionality, for whatever reason, needs to exist up here, okay? Like this. And then we'll move this one here, right? And then, excuse me, boop, like that. And then the toggle. Where's the thing here? Okay, right, and then we don't really need facts anymore. I'm not using it. Oh, except we are. We're using it right here. Right. It's literally what I'm demonstrating. Right. Okay, so, all right, so we've got this now. Okay, the toggle, everything happens here. So now this doesn't work. It doesn't do anything, right? And that's because it's modifying this state without modifying what's inside of it, right? In order to do that, what you do is you pass in the facts, okay? So now that we've passed in, now that we're passing in the facts, this piece of state, okay, to here, then when we get a new fact, oh, it still doesn't work. Oh, that's weird. Why is that, right? Well, that's because this is a state variable, and state variables, while they can change, right, what we're doing here is we're passing facts into this the way it is when we create it, right? So new fact isn't going to change anything here, right? What we need to do is make the state variable that's in here something that's called a binding. If you have let me just fix the compiler errors, and then we'll be good. There. If you have a state variable on a view that is contained inside of other views, and its source of truth, the actual data stored, should exist somewhere else for whatever reason. Should exist, but your parent should own it, right? Or you want to be able to pass it back or whatever. The way you did this in UIKit was by using delegates, okay? You would have the parent be a delegate of the child would get a reference to it, and then it would call functions and do callbacks, basically, up to the parent, right? The way you do it in SwiftUI is with something called a binding. So with a binding, okay, it's like state, it's very similar. However, it's a wrapper around the type that means that like you can't set it explicitly, right? Like here it's like, oh, we can't convert this array into binding of cat facts, right? It's very explicitly set to a type, okay? Here, you can use this .constant thing. You know, that's a quick shorthand to basically say, yeah, just take in this literal, whatever it is. You can also do var facts equals test fact 1 and then test fact 2, right? And pass it in, okay? Or you could if it would compile, right? But it doesn't, and that's because there's a special syntax I'm not showing you because I want to show you over here. Okay, so over here, now that we have this, we have our state, and we want to pass it here so that it can get changed and show correctly, right? But it's failing to build because it says it cannot convert value facts of type array of cat facts to expected type binding. Use wrapper instead. Which is like, okay, so what? We have to make this a binding now too and stuff? It's like, no, don't make it a binding. Bindings are specifically things where the source of truth, the data, is stored in a different location. It's stored somewhere else. Here, our data is being stored here. So state is the most appropriate thing we can use for it, right? In order to create a binding that we can pass to views that expect a binding from something that is currently a state, we can use $. The error goes away, and now it's showing up correctly. And the button works. All right? So when you have a piece of data that your view owns, but you want a child view to be able to receive changes that you make to that data, or to make changes to the data itself and have those surface back up to you, okay, then you use a binding. So what do I mean by changes, happening that surface back up to you? Well, let's say here we create a, delete button, okay? We'll call this button, we'll call it delete, and we'll create an action, and that is going to be facts dot remove last. Okay, this will because it pushes. It depends. Let's go ahead and remove first. Actually, remove first. Okay. So what this will do is it will remove the first fact that is there when it gets played. Oh, also, now that we've seen how it looks normally, okay, so here we are in our preview. We want to put our facts in here. We'll put a binding on it, and it's like, oh, can't find this in scope. What does that mean? Well, it's because this isn't a state variable, okay? So if we make it state, then, oh, it gives us another error. Oh, cannot convert value of type binding string to expected argument type binding cat fact, right? It's like, oh, right, these needs to be cat facts, right? So we make these cat facts, cat fact. If I can type, then that would be good, right? And then we can do this, and then we'll change this to 2, like so. Cool. All right, so now it's saying, oh, state used inline will not work unless tagged with @previewable. It's like, okay, it's working, but it gives us this warning, just use previewable. It's just a good idea. When they give you a warning and they give you a fix button, usually it's a good idea to just click it, because what they're saying is this will break things eventually if you don't do it, okay? So Use previewable state when you're inside of a preview macro in order to pretend that you have a binding being passed in to your view, okay? So here we've got our array, and it's these things, cool. And now we have this button delete down here, which is really hard to see because it's getting blocked by this stuff. So here it is. So if we delete, it starts to delete things off the top of the list, okay? Perfect. So now if we go here, that delete button is now here. It's showing up, and we have our new facts. So let's get a new fact. Oh, cool, great, that's a new fact, that's dope. And if we hit delete, it gets deleted here too, right? And I just realized that I'm not really demonstrating that to you precisely, just because it looked like that's what was happening here too. But the point is that this facts property isn't really storing anything. It's more pointing to storage elsewhere. The storage that's happening in the preview is this stuff. So you'll just have to trust me, basically, when you do new fact and do all that, and then when you hit delete, which is a button on this view, it changes the data model of this view. So cool. Okay, so that's state, that's bindings, that's how to create subviews, okay? Which you'll recall we had to do, we had to create our custom view, and then we had to do .add subview, right, or subviews.add or add view. I think, no, just view.add subview, I think, yeah. And then add the view there, and then apply constraints and everything. Here, we just call the initializer. Very nice, okay? Cool, all right, let me check, make sure, see if there's anything else I wanted to cover here. Subviews, bindings, controls, blah, 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 blah. On appear, on disappear. Okay, really quickly, there is also, you know what? Not really quickly, sorry. No, yeah, we have a couple minutes. Okay, there is also a bunch of other different kinds of controls other than buttons. So here we're gonna look at a text field, okay? Text field, again, this is, basically something that very similar to the UI text field in UIKit. However, if we look at this, it has a bunch of different things that you can use here, right? And you'll note that text field takes in a binding, okay? So it takes in a binding string for text, right? What that means is that it wants to be able to have reference to a piece of state on your view that it can change when the user does something, right? So we're going to create my fact, okay? And it's going to be a string. It's going to be an empty string to start with, all right? We're making it state because it's going to be changing, and we need to be able to bind to it. And then we're going to bind using $, my fact, down into the text field, okay? And of course we need to include that, right? The label. Okay, so now we have a text field here. Oh, cool, there it is. Look at that. Now, there are two kinds of text fields. The default one, I'm not the biggest fan of. I vastly prefer the rounded border style, okay? Which I just realized it doesn't really look all that different here, just again due to contrast, but if we switch to this, we can zoom in and stuff. Oh my goodness, stop it. Stop it. Let me do the thing I want to do. Here we go. Okay. Also, when you're in the preview, there's this one, which is interactive, and then there's this one where you can actually like click on elements, and those elements then highlight, and say, oh, this is all part of this view, and it highlights it in the text over there too, right? So you click new fact, oh, it highlights this new fact button and everything involved with it, right? You click this placeholder, oh, cool, it does that too here, right? That sort of thing. So, yeah, pretty snazzy. Okay, so we've got this. We want to have padding. Now, interestingly enough, I only want the padding to be on the left and the right-hand sides here. I don't want it to be on the top and the bottom. So rather than passing in padding 20 like this, which will, make our chonker smaller, which we don't want to do, right? You never want the chonker to be small. You want them to be big chonkers, right? What you can do is pass an array of edges, and these are enums with dot syntax that's not completing right now because of compiler issues. but we know that there's leading and trailing. Oop, trailing, like that, right? And so now this is kind of pushed in, right? And if we make the background, I don't know, teal, might make it easier, right? So now you can kind of see, that it's got that padding there, right? And then we could also, this also means that you can do a little bit of like styling where you say, oh, cool, yeah, and the top, has a padding of 5, right? Oh, okay, right? And so this coloring shows you what's happening with the view, right? And we can even have the bottom have a little bit of padding, just a little bit, right? Like so, but it's not 20, right? Cool, okay. A little more styling stuff there for you, in case you're interested. We can remove the teal now. So now that we've done this, we have this myFact variable, okay? We've bound it to this text view, our text field, and we have this myFact variable here. So we can now type in a fact. Did you know that cats are cute, right? And you can hit enter and nothing happens, right? Because we haven't set anything up to, right? But every time I modify this, the string that's in here, this variable gets modified. So this variable now exists in my code with this information, right? So you can show that by putting text down here, and this text is myFact, right? Now it's not showing now because there's nothing there, but we can say, did you know, right? And as I'm typing it, it's filling in automatically, right? Did you know cats can be chunky, right? Chunky. It's very different from chunky. Cool. All right. Our variable is bound. It's doing cool stuff. Okay, well, now I want to be able to actually modify and add this. I want to add my list, my new fact to the list, right? Okay, so that means we need a button for that, right? So let's go ahead and add a button. We'll call this one button, and we're going to change this from new fact to get fact, and this is going to be make fact, okay? And here we're going to do this, and now it's just a simple question of saying facts.append my fact, right? Except it's just a string, right? So we need to do cat fact, boop, 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 and then my fact, like so, okay? And that'll create our fact. Did you know cats can be chunky? And it shows up. There it is. Now, we do have an issue here where making the fact doesn't clear the text field, right? So it's like this. And so that's really easy to do. You can say make fact equals empty string. So now we can say, did you know some cats have pink noses? Okay, and you make a fact, and it gets cleared, right? Bindings are very powerful. They allow you to do all sorts of really, really cool stuff in SwiftUI. And they are also, if not well understood, they can be a huge, huge pain in the ass. So be ready to run into a lot of errors with these and having to look up a lot of examples to understand how they work, because it's a very different way of thinking about writing code than UIKit had you do. We're going to go on a 5-minute break, and then when we get back, we're going to look at doing navigation using SwiftUI. And then we'll talk about your assignment. I will see you all at 2:45. I'll give you 7 minutes, 2:45.